The workshop started, so I call the workshop to order. Dr. Peace, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and also members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to share some information about our strategic plan. In the first document that you have, the Green Book, that is our report back to you about this last year's strategic plan. Because some additional data has come in since we had to get this kind of organized, I have some extra handouts that I've also provided for you that we'll go through. Obviously not going to read everything to you, but want to give you an opportunity to hear some highlights and then answer any questions that you have. And then the blue document we'll go to afterwards is kind of our draft of what we suggest as next steps for strategies and additional metrics based on things that we've heard from the board throughout the course of this past year, as well as then analysis of the data and reports as they've come in. Mr. Phelps is here and he's going to help me with notes so that we can take the information and questions that you have and make sure that we get back to you. Okay? So starting in the Green Book, the first page talks about our strategic plan and summary and then our operational beliefs. Looking over at the next page, you'll see the beginning of our Goal 1 accomplishments. We're super excited about the progress that our VPK students have made. You know, during the pandemic, we really struggled to get parents to send their littlest learners to school. And we saw a significant decline in enrollment. Marianne Rodriguez and her team have done a great job of rebuilding our VPK program this year. We implemented iStation to assess their pre-reading abilities, and we've had some really good positive results, both in letter knowledge, vocabulary, and overall reading, so that we feel like, you know, the almost 1,000 VPK students that we've served in our district VPK programs are going into kindergarten at a better pace of readiness than perhaps their peers have in the past couple of years. Of course, that doesn't touch nearly all of the VPK students in the community, and there are still some students who aren't getting that outreach. So we'll continue with our baseline assessments once our students start kindergarten in accordance with the state monitoring system, and then take that data to help move the kids on from there. I'm also, you know, we weren't excited about our third grade results in ELA that came in earlier in the school year. We did see a decline overall in the district by 2 points from last year, from 47% proficient to 45% proficient. But our third graders really started the year considerably behind, particularly in our schools that had a significant percentage of digital learners in 2021. Our community was hit by the pandemic, and we saw that in last year's scores. But then we started looking at our second grade data this year from our NWEA performances, and you can see the areas in green for both reading and math on the second page. And we have far more proficient second graders going into third grade than we started with this year. So we feel like that means we're at least making progress. In particular, the open court implementation in grades K through 2 has started to really build those stronger foundational skills in the area of phonics that we believe is going to help us kind of jumpstart this next group of third graders. We did have success throughout the year with portfolios for our third graders who may not have performed at grade level or above level 1 on the FSA, but have demonstrated proficiency for promotion to 4th grade. At the end of the school year, we were at 77%. That was before we invited students for our summer camp in June. I haven't gotten the data yet back from that particular program, but we're hoping that we're going to be able to minimize third grade retention because that has such a critical impact on their overall success likelihood based on the CFE data that we've studied and just in general research.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. This is 77% of the students who would have been retained because of their test scores that did a portfolio instead?
No, this is 77% of all the third graders.
Of all third graders?
Yeah, but not everyone has to do a portfolio, though.
We now do them throughout the school year as a part of our curriculum unit plan assessments ongoing, so that all of the students are getting that mastery experience with a portfolio type assignment. So it's a little bit longer in length. We require them to do it independently, and then the responses are a little bit different than just a regular baseline formative assessment, so that they're also building stamina to prepare for that third grade test.
So-
We were asking the same question, or I just want to make sure that you're getting that.
You can go ahead and clarify.
Yeah, so was it, because I think what I understood her was saying was before, not everyone needed a portfolio, only those students that were in trouble with being retained, and they needed to do a portfolio assessment instead of passing the corresponding FSA to go to the next grade.
Right. One of the things that we implemented, I believe, 3 years ago, and the team is here that does all the great work. Stacy, did you, or Stacy's not here? Was it 3 years ago?
3 years ago.
That we built the portfolio process into our curriculum unit plans so that all third graders were getting that experience throughout the school year as opposed to just students that we'd identified who were in trouble.
So they have to do both then? So they'll do a portfolio assessment and an FSA assessment. How often is the portfolio assessment?
Marianne or Eveline, could you help me?
Okay, with the portfolio assessment 3 years ago, we made the decision that we'll give the opportunity to every child. God forbid a kid comes to the FSA day and he doesn't have a day and he fails the FSA. Well, then he has the portfolio that he has completed throughout the year that cover the standards in the FSA. So that is like a good cushion for them and backup plan for them.
This is a part of the regular instructional process now, as opposed to something separate for struggling students.
So with these numbers, then 77% of our students were able to meet the standards because if they did not pass the FSA, then they were able to make that up with the, so what?
Correct.
And I'm sorry if I don't, this is probably somewhere else. What was the percentage of students that did not pass the FSA, third grade?
55%. That's in the chart on the right, where you see that our district average was a 45% proficiency.
Got it. And so out of the students who were unable to make the transition with either of those scores, how many of them are actually in the summer program?
We have about third graders, give me 1 second.
There's about 23% of students who are retained right now unless they finish that summer program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But the data have not completed the data. Ms. Stacy Burdett is the one in charge of that, and she's out, but I can pull it.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
I just want to know how many students are actually enrolled and, ready to
I can
move
tell
on.
you that in a second.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I forgot that
No.
number right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But we did have good attendance in our summer program.
Yeah.
And in addition to working on the portfolios throughout that camp, they also had the opportunity to post-test with NWEA. So we can compare their spring well, they didn't do a spring NWEA because we didn't want to double test them. But we'll have a summer NWEA that gives them another option to demonstrate proficiency. So basically, we have 4 ways for them to demonstrate mastery for promotion. the portfolio, the FSA, summer attendance and portfolio, and the NWEA.
Now, how long, because the FSA is obviously administered by the state, and we don't get the results back right away, we gotta wait for them to come back. Is NWEA processed locally? Or
Yes.
do we have to send it out to somewhere else?
No, we get that locally. Our other scores all came in last week, so Leah's team's been concentrating on those, but I'll have that data for you by the end of this week or early next week. Okay? Just a couple of other highlights on this page. All of our high school teams now do have average GPAs for student athletes at 3.0 or higher. And we did some great work with our workforce training program. We had 121 adult industry short-term credential certifications through our Urban League partnership, and we're looking forward to moving on with that. I'm also pleased to share with you that our 4th and 5th grade results came in stronger, as well as then our overall school learning performances. So I would ask that you look at the sheet. And then also, there's a highlight sheet here. Again, I'm not going to read all of these, just some of these. But what this represents is ELA achievement in 2021 compared to 2022. So if you see green, they improved in their overall proficiency in ELA. Say, for example, at Boggy Creek Elementary School, 48% of their students in grades 3, 4, and 5 demonstrated proficiency in 2021. That number improved to 49% in 2022. If it's in red, they went down. Say, for example, Central went from 31% to 30%. The same is there for math achievement, science achievement. Then you go over to the learning gains column. And I'm super excited because while we didn't demonstrate as much proficiency as we're certainly wanting to get us back entirely to our pre-COVID levels, we are showing a lot of strength in overall learning gains, particularly in math. And then on the back of the sheet, you've got the lowest 25% in math, as well as middle school acceleration. And then over to your right, you see the total points in 2022 compared to 2021, and the percentage of total points, as well as then their final grades. And I'm very pleased to show that a lot of our schools did make growth, which is what we need to do to get to where we want to be. We're not there yet, but we are making progress. So overall, we had 96% of our schools at a C or better. We did have 2 district schools earn a D, that's Central and Highlands, that we'll be working with them very, very carefully. Overall, 42 schools, or 84%, had an increase in overall points. Deerwood Elementary School increased by 23 points, and Mill Creek by 17 points as the highest levels of increases. 70% of our schools increased in ELA learning gains. Deerwood, Mill Creek, again, significant growth there. 90% of our schools showed increases in math learning gains. COA at 32 points, Narcoossee 31 points, and PAFA at 31 points. Overall, our Poinciana corridor in the elementary school performed very well in terms of growth this year, which they had really felt the pandemic the year before. And we had 86% or 43 schools in math learning gains in the lowest 25%. So that's that lowest quartile. So you'll see that even though Central Avenue earned a D for the year, they had the highest increase in math learning gains in the lowest 25%. So we know that they're doing good work. It's just not making a difference yet to get us all the way out of the COVID issues.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're going to go over it later, and I know we're spending a little bit of time on academic achievement, but I think it's really important.
Well, that's our goal 1, academic success. So.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah, sorry.
I know that
Yeah.
it's important, so I'm okay with asking a bunch of questions. With regards to interventions for, and I'm not even specifically speaking about the 2D schools, I'm actually not concerned. I want to see, I have hope for better gains even in the C schools. What does the intervention program look like, and are we implementing that just in the schools that are Ds, or are we, pushing that up to the C schools as well?
We're really looking at consistently across the district, more effective implementation. We're talking about getting better at getting better. So we got better than we were a year ago, but we're not where we want to be, okay? So some of the curriculum programs, for example, and initiatives that you all have been seeing on board agendas are some of those particular things that we're using. This will be our second year of adoption and implementation of the new ELA curriculum,
Yeah.
which is aligned to BEST. Last year, some of our schools didn't get their new materials until about October. So we didn't have nearly the full year of implementation of that curriculum-aligned or standards-aligned work. So we're excited about implementing the rest of that more effectively in our ELA classrooms, and that's K through 10, okay, at all of our schools. Our cups have been refined this summer. Beth Davis and our ELA team have been kind of leading that particular work in the ELA field. And so we feel like teachers will have a better understanding of how best to use those materials to meet the needs of our students. You've also seen some other reading programs come through, ones that we've looked at as being more effective than others. For example, what we're doing with the Q3000, what we're doing with the Beable, and those types of things to really get to the heart of what's working. But that's a lot of what our REA team is doing now, is looking at these final performance results along with those platforms and tools to make sure that what we're investing in is showing the gains that we want. And that's across the board. Our tutoring programs had some high yields in terms of high quality effectiveness, so we'll
Yeah.
be doing that again. That is primarily for our targeted schools. So definitely for Central and Highlands, we will probably still look at all of those C schools, particularly in our more vulnerable corridors, to get as much help in the classroom supporting teachers along the way as we can through our trained tutoring programs. In math, we are finally now going to have fully adopted and aligned materials for the best standard through the McGraw-Hill adoption, which again, it's going to be a new implementation, but Andrea Jurgens and her team have been revising the cups, making sure that our tasks are rigorous and complex and standards aligned, but also not so overwhelming to teachers that they don't engage the kids in the text. And then we're looking at both the McGraw-Hill computer adaptive intervention tool, as well as a tool called Dreambox that some other districts have had really good success in for math interventions.
One additional question, and I'm kind of going a little bit ahead, because as you know, I may have to leave the meeting. I know that one of our goals is also community engagement, and under that, we have the parent engagement piece. Do you, or does a team, anybody here, have any data on if there is a correlation between schools with higher grades and parent engagement? And if not, if you don't have data, can we get that? What I'm trying to get at is, we do a lot of things in school, and I'm not going to say we burden our teachers. I mean, they love to make sure that our children are growing, but this is a partnership, and I've been talking about this for 3 years. I want to give parents the tools to be partners with our teachers so that they're not overwhelmed by having to be the sole providers of this, right? So I wonder, one, if we can get, or I don't know if anybody else is interested, can get data on if there is a correlation between parent engagement. I don't know how you measure that, whether it's PTA or whatever, and the letter grade of the school. And two, I don't know if you're going to talk about it later, but how can we empower parents to be more involved in some of these initiatives at home so that they're getting it from both places, not just one?
We don't have specific data that I could share with you today about our schools. I can tell you that research does show an effect size for higher levels of parent engagement, but I also think it's important for us to think about different types of parent engagement, because not everybody can come to the PTA meeting or the SAC meeting. But if they're, for example, following Remind and engaging with their teachers on how they can help their students at home, or this summer we launched with the Alliance for Public Schools, the podcasts about things that parents could do to extend learning, or guardians, grandmas, aunts, uncles, whoever's at home, could extend learning this summer. And we had some great guest speakers from members of this team who kind of shared their ideas, and we've got a couple more of those podcasts to launch. They haven't had like torrential following, but each week it kind of grows, and we'll continue to save those and make those available to parents and push that as an envelope. We're also looking at a program called Thought Exchange, which asks like a general statement, I'm thinking it will be very helpful in our teacher morale issues and teacher morale areas of focus as we move forward for Goal 2, but also for asking parents, what is it that you need to help support your child's
Right.
learning? And then the program actually uses artificial intelligence to analyze the answers. Parents can see somebody else's responses and like it or rate it, or not that one's good or one's bad, but what
Right.
makes sense to them, to give us really strong stakeholder engagement and some feedback on what else they want and what else they need. Definitely we found that video resources are more effective a lot of times in engaging with people. Like, for example, during the pandemic, when people are looking at how they engage their kids with digital tools.
Yeah.
We had to do a lot of hands-on stuff that our green shirts were able to tape. And we've always tried to make that available in at least English and Spanish. And anything that we do in writing can be translated into a multitude of languages through our website's features. But those are things that we're trying to do to try to encourage parents to be partners in the work.
Yeah, and I don't think that every parent has to join the PTA or the SAC.
Right.
That's definitely not what I was implying, but I was implying just ways to empower parents. And also, I think you touched on it on your last statement, but keeping in mind that not all of our families are native English speakers. In fact, most of them are not. So how can we we have tons of staff that speaks other languages. How can we leverage their knowledge as well to be able to reach out to the community and find better ways to empower parents? Or caretakers, I should say caretakers.
Our multicultural department has done a great job with their parent university program. The only thing is, attendance is fairly small.
Yeah.
Mr. Arguello and Mr. Melendez were there at the final session, and when we got to see those. And it's an annual event. We try to invite people back, but we're only reaching 25 to 30 people at a time. And obviously, that's not going to be enough as we grow. But we're trying to expand those types of things and also to leverage anything that we can do that we can tape and record and then have
Yeah.
online for other people to watch in their leisure.
Thank you.
Dr. Pace, so I have 4 things that have come to mind so far. One is acknowledgement of what this information is telling us, because I went to the state site and we're comparing ourselves to the state. It seems to me that we're about 10 points or 10 spots from the bottom in every category. So one is to understand that, because without understanding where you're at, there's no moving in any effective direction. Number 2, I think that we have, as a district, focused way too much on tools and not enough on skill. So it may be a better idea, in my opinion, if instead of trying to overthink the problem from here, to allow the teachers more freedom to do their job on site, because they're the ones, here's the thing, if I'm trying to manage someone who's in the room on the other side of that wall, it's far more difficult than me having a conversation with someone here at the table with me. So if we do too much of that, normally it's far more difficult and not as effective. Third, going back to the tools thing, we should be focusing, I think, on the basics at this point, because that's where our deficiencies are, and there's a lot. Math, English, when you look at the state scores compared to ours, these are basics. So I would disagree with the idea that the majority of the people in our county, that English is their second language. That's not the case. The case is that the majority of the people in the district may be Hispanic, but not necessarily English as a speaking second language, right? So if we get back to the basics in terms of being rigorous, maybe not with so many fancy tools, because if you look at the funding, we have all the funding necessary that other successful districts have. So it's just obviously so mistakes that people make in the field in the Army, right, is that you pack too much stuff that you have to carry on your back. You don't need it, right? And all you do is make your job harder. Sometimes it's better to carry food and water And when you take care of the basics, have a much easier go at it. And so that might be something that the district may want to take into consideration, because everything fancy that we've done hasn't been the most effective, but it has been the most expensive. So at some point, when we're looking at the efficiency of some of these things, it's just not going good. Like, I went past into goal 2, and we have the lowest administrative cost per student. That's not necessarily working in our favor, because it's not necessarily an efficient use of money, right? It doesn't matter how good we can be at saving money, right? We may have small administrative costs, but we are spending a lot of money in the areas that we're not doing well. So what we're doing doesn't seem to be efficient in terms of its output.
Thank you for your feedback, Mr. Arguello, and I certainly respect what it is that you're saying. I've certainly said today that we're not where we want to be, that we need to get better at getting better. But I am proud of the work that our teachers and students and the folks in this room have done over the course of the last year to get us in a better place than we were a year ago. So that now, like the other Central Florida districts, other than Seminole, our district grade is a B. Do I want to have 2 Ds and more Cs than As and Bs? Absolutely not. But we have to start somewhere to get better.
Yeah.
And you start with learning gains.
But our grade of a B doesn't reflect really the academic performance entirely. It's not just about that, because as you said here, and that's something that I was looking at also, we have 17 schools that are A or B. We have 50 schools, right?
Correct.
Right, so, and the vast majority are Cs, and some of them are C minuses. So it's, I agree, there's a ton of work going into it. So that's not, like I said, it doesn't matter. If you pack everything that you own into your backpack and you hump a mountain with it, you're doing the work. It's not about the work. The work is being done. Nobody's discounting the work is being done. But you're not always going in the right direction. So sometimes it's good to, regardless of how proud you are, being proud is not a strategic initiative, right? Changing, right, and not analyzing, those are strategic initiatives. So being proud is just a reflection, but it's not necessarily a strategic initiative. And we're here talking about our strategic goals.
Correct. And part of our strategic goal is to get better at getting better, and we do that through analysis of the scores, looking at our tools, simplifying our curriculum unit plans so that they're not overwhelming to teachers, and that they have a starting place for where to go. But it's also important to remember that about 50% of our instructional staff is not trained in education anymore. Now, I wasn't either, and I think I did okay. I sometimes apologize to my first-year students because I didn't know what I was doing in the classroom. But we worked hard, and I had a lot of support, and we got better. And that's what we also have to do with our teachers who are not trained in the education field. That's one of the reasons why we've asked the board to invest in more mentors in Goal 2 as a part of our talent management strategy. Because it does all have to go together, sir. You're exactly right. The talent management piece, the fiscal responsibility piece, the community engagement piece, all of that has to work together to improve our academic success, which is our #1 mission. I totally agree with you.
I'm not so sure that it's a teacher's issue, because you're right. Obviously, a lot of the teachers that are teaching in the classroom right now, they're not necessarily teachers by classical education, but you still have experts, right? They're still in the classroom. This stuff is not hard. I mean, it's hard managing a classroom. The subject matter is not hard for an adult normally, right? I mean, so everybody who comes into the class that you hire, I imagine Tammy has made sure that they're suitable to teach the information, right? It's just a matter of the process. To me, it's the process is the weakness. Aside from having, if the teacher aspect of our problems is not having enough teachers. But if we had a teacher in every single classroom in the appropriate teacher-to-student ratio, then the teachers wouldn't necessarily be the problem, because they're going through the same stuff throughout the entire state. But not every district in the state is 10 points from the bottom or 10 spots from the bottom.
Well, if I can, Dr. Pace, real quick, just to keep it concentric a little bit for time purposes. One thing that I don't see here that I would like to see, because lately I've been doing research and accountability and looking at the dashboard. This is the end of the year and the testing. I'll send you out an email later because I don't really have the notes here. I would like to see it presented differently too, to be honest. Like for instance, like I wanted to say like second grade, right? Then each school, for instance, like Central Avenue, I'm just starting, I can't think of anything that's earlier in the alphabet, the Central Avenue,
Boggy
right?
Creek.
So, or Boggy Creek, yeah, let's take out Boggy Creek, right? And then, so the first thing you say Boggy Creek, right? And then you say math, science, and ELA, right? And the next column will be this year's results. the school raw grade, because here we have like averages above. I just want to know what the raw grade was, because when I went to the Department of Education, when my son took his score, I got to see what the individual school grade was, what the average of the district was, and then what the average of the state was. So I think that'd be a better presentation, and I'll email it to you to go. So in other words, you see Boggy Creek, and in first column, column 2, math, ELA, and science, or whatever that grade level does, because if the grade level it's NWEA, let's just say it's third grade, I keep getting all these FSA, the King change, it's not going to be FSA next year, it's going to be whatever, PMI. But anyway, let's just say FSA. So it says third grade FSA, just keep it simple. NWEA, it's more complicated, but the point is, yeah, those 3 tests that were given that year, right? And then I want to see the raw score of what that school was, the raw score of what the average of the district was, and what the raw score of the average of what the state. And then the following year is like the year comparison. So this is 2022, and in 2021, it's there. And then that last column is the delta of the school. You know, how they did. I don't even know how they did compared to delta for the state, 'cause I can calculate that on my own, but how they did, right? So that way, it's a little bit more clear than have all the schools on just second grade. Then I flip the page, and I go fourth grade. All the different assessments that were given there, and that way I can start comparing the data. I can compare apples to apples. And then, what I'd also like, since it's just those 3 things, and this is a long column, is maybe some notes on why that delta existed. You know what I mean? So let's say it existed on math, then maybe they can say, I don't know, I'm not a principal, I don't know why math scores would go down. I mean, to me, that should be like a little justification. You know what I mean? Like a little note. Hey, the math scores went down because nobody showed up, or my math coach was missing. I mean, that's to me like a great management tool. Because let's say, you're supposed to be assigned, they did a school improvement plan, they're supposed to get 10 math coaches, but we couldn't hire them. You know what I mean? That way it's not here to point fingers. Let's just be honest and transparent with the data. And let's just say, hey, we only hired 3 math teachers. The school improvement plan said we're going to get 10. We couldn't find them. You know what I mean? So now it's not me, being punitive to that principal. Now it's like, oh, wait a second. We need to look for more math coaches. You know what I mean? Or maybe we need to realign it. So it's not necessarily of like, oh, I gotcha kind of moment. But it just kind of just be honest with the data. And each school say, hey, this is how they performed, and this was their raw score, and this is why they didn't meet the goal. You know what I mean? And in that way, we're having an honest discussion, because when you fill out that document, I want the principal to talk to you, or the assistant, or somebody needs to be going down the road and saying, hey, why did they go down? And then the assistant principal or whoever, I'm not going to micromanage it. The point is somebody needs to write that note, but after having a conversation with the principal on why they didn't hit their numbers. You know what I mean?
Well, first of all, you don't have to do an email, because Mr. Phelps has taken notes for me, so we've got the fact
Okay,
that I've got kind of your
No, just
request
trying to get it in
of what
there.
it is, so that's all good.
Yeah.
I think what I want to share with you is our monthly stock take forms.
And by the way, and the last thing on that, I'm sorry, I apologize. And since you only take tests once a year, I don't need that every month. That's a special request after we get all the scores back for the annual assessments.
Well, we will have at least 3 assessments this year in the ELA and the math as a result of the state piece. So we will definitely be reporting to you where they ended the year, right now, what the 2022 ELA scores were, for example, what we see in the fall of 2022, what we see then in the winter of 2023, and then we'll report back how they did in the spring of 2023. We have that data, it just is overwhelming sometimes to try to put it into a format that made sense. So that's what I've been trying to figure out with Leah, best how to do that, but we can certainly tweak those forms. But like, for example, this week, today, our elementary school principals and their school improvement teams are meeting over at Transportation specifically to dig deeper into their data, analyze root causes, and then start the formation of their school improvement plan. And then every month, they will come together as a school leadership team. Dr. Straker and his team, our REA team, support that. The assistant soups can't be at every school every month, but they go to spot check, particularly our schools that have higher needs right now. We will target those schools in particular first to talk about what's going well, what's not, and what is it that we're going to do about it. It's very much a part of our professional learning community, where our teachers are getting together each week to look at their data and their achievement to say, okay, what is it that we need our kids to know? How are we going to know when they do? What are we going to do if they don't? And what are we going to do if they do know it and it's time for us to move some of them on, but not all of them on? So that we're having those ongoing, rich, strategic conversations. Are we perfect yet? No, we're not. I'm first to tell you, I'm not pleased with where we are. But I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made over the course of the last year since 2021. And we just have to get better at getting better. Okay?
Yeah.
Dr. Grace, I'm going to say, and I'm going to compliment you and the district and the whole team for what they have done. And it has been a very, very, very challenging year for all of us. Purposely spent a full day in one of the middle schools, and I substituted at one of the classes at an elementary school. And so I got to see firsthand what they have to go through. And it's tough, especially in a growing community where schools open up at capacity. And people the kids are rolling into the classroom that just moved here a week ago. And we're having so much growth that it's just unbelievable. In the class I substituted, little kid comes up to me, and we gave him the lesson, but he spoke no English. And he came up to ask a question, and I couldn't help him. But fortunately, the kids in the class help interpret, and we put him on the path. So there's a lot of nuances that can't be seen on these papers that these teachers have to go through on every single day, and it's tough. So to be at a B with all of those things that we've been having to focus on with the growth, I think it's a compliment. I really do. Could we be better? Absolutely. That's our goal, is to be better. That's our goal. But I just want everybody to understand that teachers are going through a lot. There's a lot of teachers that are having to leave. Teachers are going through divorce, teachers are going through cancer, there's so many life problems that they're having to go through too. Now I know that doesn't, again, it's not something that you can't put in a formula, but it does exist.
It's not, but it's all, yes, I agree with you, of course, but it's also the ancillary things that they have to deal with. That's not on here that we see. The mandates and the make sure this is happening, make sure that is happening, on top of actually being teachers. I just spoke with one of my direct reports, and she was a teacher, and she's like, I would stay if I could just teach, but I have to do all these other things. So it's not just, it's a very difficult job.
And we've talked about the fact that student discipline was very challenging this past year. Attendance has still remained a challenge. So that's why Goal 5 is important. But it takes all 5 of these components of the work to come together to really be able to achieve our goals of outstanding student success.
Yeah, but there's
I
also.
wonder, thank you. And I'm kind of talking a lot because I have to leave and I want to make sure I get some points across. I wonder if there is room for us as a board to have a discussion about how we take away some of those ancillary things. I know we've had the discussion before, maybe it was a different board, maybe we just didn't have I don't know, but just hearing from someone tell me directly, I would be in the classroom if I could just teach. And I know a lot of this comes from the state, so it isn't a matter of us as a legislative priority, maybe talking to our legislative, folks about how we can help them, because at the end of the day, the less time they're spending in the education part of it, the less effective they're going to be. And so we keep having the conversation about why aren't kids performing better? Well, yeah, it's a problem all over the country. We just got data that I think people are like, what was the percentage? Like 67% of people in America read like an 8th grade level or 6th grade level. Yeah, well, because we're not teaching. So how do this is not even a conversation for right now, but just something for the board to think about. Is it time for us to maybe take an active role in getting some of those ancillary things off of their plate? I don't know.
And no, I agree with the chairwoman 1,000%. As a matter of fact, I was speaking with some of the union members this past week, and because I'm like, be specific. I'm beyond just like, if you really want me to solve a problem, don't just talk in generalities. Let's be specific about it. And one of them said, okay, well, here you go. You ready for it, Mr. Melendez? I'm like, okay. Like the 5th grade ELA alone, there's like MAP fluency tests every 2 or 4 weeks. Then NSGR, NSGRA, 4 times a week, 4 times a year. There's NWA, there's weekly benchmark testing. That's like, and then they don't know if CUPS has these times, specifically in it. So they're like constantly forced. And if we're constantly assessing, then you're kind of taking away time to get them to get corrected. You know what I mean? So, and I don't mind every now and then, assessments, but just sometimes we're over-assessing. A little too much, you know what I mean? And I understand, but that's what the FSA is for too, So maybe just not so frequent, like, man, maybe once a semester, at the end of the semester, and allow the teacher the opportunity to give them corrective training if they're behind, So that's something that I hear, because a lot of teachers are stressed that there's so many, like, individual best marks in assessments all the time.
I think, too, we need to maybe provide some better clarity about what those expectations are. Dr. Reyes did share with me that you had contacted her after meeting with the union folks about some of those concerns. The benchmark end-of-unit exams are not every week, they're end-of-unit. So that can be every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, and it's less than a class period to monitor. We aren't doing NWEA at all in ELA and math, because those are going to be the state assessments that are just 3 times a year. And the MAP fluency is about a teacher having a student read a short passage to them and then recording how that fluency is assessed as they go along. So it's something they do on a regular basis as a part of instruction in their small groups. So I think some of that we need to definitely clarify in terms of what those expectations are. And I did confirm with Dr. Davis's team that for example, Osceola Wright is built into the CUPs, so that there's designated time set aside for that. But we certainly can provide better clarity, and we are looking at reducing that assessment as much as we possibly can. That is something that the state legislature included in their progress monitoring piece, that they're going to be gathering information from districts across the state about how much time is spent on required testing, so that they can start figuring out how to whittle that down. Currently, it can be no more than 5% of time. But we want to try to get that down even more.
And now that actually leads into Mr. Arguello's point. I don't think he even realized what he was saying, but that was the tools. We got 10,000 tools, you know what I mean? And I'm helping him clarify his position a little bit, is
Whether he wants you to do it.
yes. So, but which
Please,
tool?
please,
but-
by all means.
But at least I'm understanding where he's coming from, and at least I'm doing my interpretation of them. So which tool is the most effective?
Right.
So if we got 5,000 assessments, which assessment leads to better performance? So we're not over-testing and overworking everyone. It's like doing a science experiment, and you're changing 5 variables at the same time. You'll never know what was the cause of what made it better, you know what I mean? Sometimes you got to narrow it down and keep it simple. So kind of going back to Mr. Arguello's original point, but now, I guess what it is I'm catching up to his brain, is what it is. And so, but I'm being more specific with it. And like, I guess that's a great example, a real-life example of what he was referring to, is 5 million assessments. Well, which one is the best one? And why don't we just use the best one? Maybe we experiment 1 year, get rid of all the other ones, do one and see if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, then we know that's not a good assessment. If we chuck that assessment and try another assessment, and I'm okay with not performing perfect right away if I know there's progress.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we're trying. And if there's a transparency and we're like working with everybody, I'm not gonna say, oh, we didn't get a good grade. Well, it's probably my fault, because I said chuck out the other ones. So I'm gonna blame myself, and I have to be accountable to the voters why I failed them. You know what I mean? But, you know what I mean? I think that when you're doing too many things at one point, kind of what Mr. Arguello is saying, I think I understand his point, and this kind of relates to that.
Well, and I definitely take ownership for where we are, not of the getting better part, because I'm very proud of the work that our teachers and principals have done. But over the course of the last 2 years, I think we've all been off mission quite a bit, particularly me, because, we're constantly in crisis management mode, particularly as it relates to COVID. So I'm absolutely committed to being more visible and active in our school support, so that, we can continue our work and re-catch up from where we were pre-COVID.
Right, I understand that. And so to Chairman's point, I guess, is just kind of, that's what I would like to see in your next strategic plan, or just kind of thought process, is, kind of evaluating like all those assessments and say, hey, which one's really important?
Our
Which
REA
one's
team
the...
is doing program evaluation on all of
Because a lot of teachers are complaining about that. At the end of the day, I know we're at that point, recruitment, retention is another point, everyone jumped around a little bit, and that's the recurring theme that keeps coming out. They're getting burned out. So I don't want to keep burning out my teachers and losing them.
And that's another reason why I think the work that we're doing with our Teacher Morale Collaborative is going to be super important. We've got to get their real feedback.
I think one of the correlations that we're missing out is the correlation between veteran teachers, especially considering that we are having so much trouble having actual classically trained teachers, and our scores. Yeah, I can pretty much guarantee you I don't have to be a genius like Mr. Melendez, but I bet you veteran teachers are doing a tremendous job educating our kids, and we're not doing a great job of holding on to them.
Well, our principals and our REA team analyze results by teacher, by student. So just a couple of other data points. For as far as AA degrees and industry certification and advanced placement, that information will continue to change over the course of the month as data continues to come in and clean up. I can share with you, it's not here listed, but our our advanced placement proficiency rate improved by 6% over a year ago, so we're excited about that. And again, that data will continue to be cleaned up, and we'll do a full report for the board in September or October after Survey 5. Our FAFSA completion rate is actually one of the highest in the state at 58%. We've done some really good work there trying to get our FAFSA completion, because the students who complete FAFSA are far more apt to go on into post-secondary study, whether that be at Osceola Technical College, Valencia, or another program. We also had strong performance in our post-secondary acceptances. Some areas, obviously, that we've already talked about that are opportunities for growth. Definitely our ELA and math proficiency overall. We want to return to our pre-COVID levels. Our civics achievement took a little bit of a dip this year, and we want it to be back above the state average and performing pre-COVID results. Our college and career acceleration improved, particularly in a couple of our schools, but it's still an area where we underperform compared to the rest of the state. It's a lot better than it was when we were 61 out of 67. But still, that's an area that we want to continue to improve. And definitely our subgroup performance. We still find that our ESE and ELL students and our free and reduced lunch students are underperforming compared to our other students, and we want to make sure that we're closing that gap. So unless there are other questions, I won't go over the back of this sheet on charter school performance. You guys can review that for yourselves. We had some charter schools make some significant increase. LAM in particular performed well. American Classical was a B, just close to an A. But overall, we had about 69% of our charters earned Cs and 31% earned Ds or Is. So we're currently working with them on those particular levels.
Dr. Pace, one more question with regards to post-secondary acceptances. 82% of our students are going to have some kind of post-secondary plan?
They have a post-secondary plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we won't know that data until like years later?
Correct.
Okay.
Also, under advanced placement, it has enrollment. Next to that column, I'd like to see the number of students that are enrolled that actually got like a 3 or better. This is the 3 that has.
We just got that data last week, and so that's where it did improve by 6%, but that's why it's not included in this yet. We just got it.
But this is an update, because
Yeah.
enrolled is one thing, but actually
Yeah.
doing well.
Survey 5 is when we report that information to the state, and I typically do a board report. So it's either like September, October board meeting that we can give final information about industry certification, AAs, IB, and AP. Okay. All right, so moving on to goal 2, as you all know, staffing challenges has been one of our biggest hurdles over the course of the last year. We're not alone in that regard, but it certainly does make the work of our teachers and our staff members across the district, our principals, incredibly harder when we have vacancies or we have substitute issues or that can't come in. We have had some success with growing our own in that 100 support staff folks or parapros and 74 substitutes did transition to become teachers this year. Diana Martinez and her team continue to do outreach on how to become a teacher in both English and Spanish. And we are continuing to try to use every form of communication, social media that we can to try to reach folks. We've had about a 7% increase in diversity and administrative hiring since I started in 2016. And while our veteran teachers aren't satisfied, and understandably so, I mean, it has been a significant increase in instructional starting salary if you look at it from 2018-19 at $41,400 to $48,500 with this particular salary increase that the board has just approved. It's still pending ratification votes. We did have 120 new teachers that were non-renewed this year, 79 of those for certification issues. We are still working through our certification office and Angel Osterman to help these individuals either complete their tests, complete a course, and if they are eligible for certification, we are enrolling them right back into our system. And we're going to look tomorrow at about 30 who had to be non-renewed because of ELL certification issues, endorsement issues, that we're going to see if we can come up with a plan to sponsor them, have them contracted to do it this year, and work around scheduling issues. Our new teacher center mentoring program continues to demonstrate a higher than average retention at almost 90% in our 19 highest need schools, which typically have the most churn in terms of new people. We do have our new third-party administrator for health services plan under contract to begin serving the district on October the 1st. And our health center has now served up to 48% of our members in the plan as a unique health center patient. I did get some updated data today on vacancies. We are at 281 and a half instructional vacancies in our schools, 102 in elementary, 89 in middle and high, and 90.5 in high school. Keep in mind that in addition to recruitment and retention issues, we are also still experiencing growth. Our growth is projected at 4%. So we've added positions, and then we've added mentors, which pulls some people out of the classroom. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, if we have holes that we have to fill with certified people on our staff who potentially had been going to serve in that mentor role or a coaching role, we're going to have to make them priority number one, be in the classroom. We currently have 35 bus driver vacancies. There are 13 completing a class this week. We know that not 100% of them typically are successful, but we are continuing to recruit. We have 39 attendant vacancies. There's a job fair tomorrow that we're working on in conjunction with CareerSource. It will be at the Valencia College Osceola campus between 10 and 2, and then we're advertising for all positions there. And we confirmed with Kelly Services today that they have transitioned about 230 of our former district subs to Kelly Services employees and hired an additional 130 new people into their substitute pool. So we've got 360 active candidates, and they are continuing to recruit.
Dr. Pence, what was your elementary teacher vacancy? And middle school, I missed that.
102 elementary
89.
and 89 in middle and core.
Thank you.
And just some other opportunities. We are working with EAB, they're a well-renowned research firm, on a teacher morale collaborative. I had an opportunity to hear a research presentation when I was at the AASA conference. And this is our district, along with 15 other districts, working through that study, what they found and what strategies they've employed to try to help address this issue. Because morale is one of the biggest reasons for people leaving education. Certainly salary is one of them, but it's more about the job itself, the working conditions, and morale issues. Feeling valued, respected, and trusted is a huge piece of what we're trying to do there.
Why not just work with the union for that? I mean,
We've offered.
the union is refusing to tell you why the employees are upset?
Well, the union represents right at about 53% of our employees, but I've said this is something that why don't we work on together as a group, as a collaborative, and, that just hasn't worked out yet, but we're continuing to have those conversations.
Okay.
We will be returning to our stay interview process, as well as coaching our principals and assistant principals and staff recognition strategies, and we're looking to use thought exchange as a way to kind of leverage engagement and gather information specifically from teachers about what it is we can take off their plates. What are their, concerns about those types of things. So, and one of the things that you would see in our draft proposal for next year would be working on that plan to address compression. And I believe that there's pretty strong consensus among the board to make that one of your legislative priorities, unless you tell me otherwise. That's what I've heard in other discussions.
I'm kind of waiting till after, so at the end of each school, ask a few
Okay.
questions if I can. Now here it says the number of teachers hired for I guess that's from the beginning of the school year was 856, right? And out of the 856, 156 basically resigned, or about 20%. But what's the total number of resignations this year? Not just the new ones that were hired, so I'm curious to see what were the total number of resignations and actually what was the total number per school? Because
And we will
sometimes there
have
might
that
be a higher
data?
amount per school.
Right, and we look at it by school, we'll have that data in August, because we have to wait to make sure that they show up in August. What we always do is to look at who was here in August of 2021, who comes back to start the new year in August of 2022, to measure our accurate retention. Does that make sense?
people don't submit a resignation, sometimes they just go away and don't come back, is that what you're saying?
Well,
I'm just trying to understand.
some of them don't submit a resignation until the week before school starts, or the day before they're supposed to return from
I'm
pre-plan.
new to this, that's why I'm not into this.
So, to
I'm
make
not an
sure that
assistant
it's an
principal.
accurate number, we've typically done year over year. Just because, like I said, we do lose people during the summer. Somebody moves away, somebody gets sick. No matter how much we tell them that, if you're planning to retire or leave us at the end of you still have insurance through August, they still sometimes are reluctant to tell us until the last minute.
That's things too, because of how we plan, like, we don't know if that, the principal thinks that that position is full, awesome, 3 new people don't show up, and I'm like, they're scrambling at the last minute.
I spoke with Patty today, the principal from Highlands at the school improvement training, and I said, okay, so how many vacancies do you have? Because I want to make sure she's one of our vulnerable schools that we're covering that. She goes, well, I had 8 and now I have 10. I said, okay, I'm on it. Immediately called Tammy and said, we've got to get help and
Can we
support
try to, like,
specifically
maybe,
for hiring them.
I guess, and this is one potential solution, because I don't want to just bring up problems, because anyone can identify a problem, right? Can we, like, allow them, each principal, to overhire to like a certain percentage? Because there's always going to be a vacancy somewhere, you know what I mean? And just let that person, now, the person that's applying might not like it, because they may have to end up going to Celebration. If they wanted to go to, like, say, St. Cloud, and I got an hour drive to go somewhere, but I figured if somebody wanted a position, and they got offered a position, at least they're happy to have a job than no job. And I'm saying that's not perfect scenario, but I was just thinking, I'd rather be overstrength than understrength a little bit. And right now, I don't think we're gonna be overstrength, because we're gonna overhire, there's always gonna be some kind of vacancy
We
somewhere.
have made sure that we talk specifically to our principals about if you have a qualified candidate, go ahead and sign them on the dotted line. If you don't have a need for them, we can always enlist one of your partners who does have a need. I talked with Mr. Noyes today from Canoe Creek K-8, same thing. He said he had 3 third-grade teachers that he thought would be really good. I said, okay, well, I want you to call Patty Cummings at Highlands because she's in need. So those are the things that we're constantly doing. And even when we have to do staffing adjustments in the fall, and say, for example, Boggy Creek has a shortfall of kids compared to projection, and yet she's fully staffed, and we have to move a teacher. We wouldn't move a teacher from Boggy Creek to Chestnut unless there was nothing else, right? And not because Chestnut's a bad place to be, it's a great place to be. But if I live in BVL, I may not want to go out there every day, right? So we always try to place them in an area that's as close to their geographic location as possible.
It's a 3-day train ride. I think the issue of people not being able to depend on people coming back a week before school starts is a management relationship issue, right? So when you have a relationship with your employees, you can gauge who's going to come back because you're watching, right? And so people are giving you the signs. So if somebody's looking, it doesn't happen on Monday and then on Friday. If that happens, it's going to be a dozen in the entire school district, right?
And that's a part of our stay interview process, identifying those folks as red, they're going to leave no matter what, as yellows, where you've got to spend some extra time and attention, particularly during the summer, or green, they're good to go, they're solid. But things happen like family emergencies that cause people to leave at the very last moment.
Or somebody's spouse might get a job.
Somebody's
somewhere.
spouse gets a job. Those things happen. And in Florida, it's a right-to-work state. There's no contractual commitment beyond what we hope is that good management relationship that you're going to tell me what's going on. But we're continuing to monitor those things as we go.
Dr. Bates, do we forecast the volume of veteran teachers we have? Because I remember, Tammy, I asked you, I think we talked about it a few months ago. We've got over 900-plus employees that have 20-plus years of service. Are we forecasting like a mushroom cloud at some point in the future of an Osceola of veteran teachers that are going to be leaving?
There could be various reasons. In fact, we had a big exodus when the drop percentage changed, when they decided that the legislator changed your drop percentage, and we had a lot of teachers register to retire that hadn't even planned on doing that. So it just depends on if they still want to work. I mean, we have people that do not want to leave and been here for lots and lots of years.
Well, I know. Well, that's a big number, though, from me, because remember we got into the 30 years, and that was a big number. So it's a.
Another thing too is a lot of people will not let go of their position because they may be going to Orange County or a different county, and they want to make sure that they have their onboarding process and that job locked in. And summer is short. I mean, we're almost ready for school. So that is a big problem too, with people not wanting to let us know because they're like, I don't have my sure job. And I may think that you're going to stay, and you've told me that, or I may think you're going to leave, but you're not able to get the job in Orange County. So there's lots of factors that come into the leaving process at the end of the year.
And then my last question would be, because everyone was talking about the bus drivers, where are we at right now? What's the number of vacancies of drivers? Does it look like we're hiring new ones?
35, she said.
35 drivers, vacancies. It's not listed there, I just
Oh,
mentioned
okay.
it.
I was like,
35 open vacancies, and we have 13 completing in class.
Okay, and what about the new attendance? We approved attendance.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to fill all of them. We've got 39 attendant vacancies. But that's a big push for the job fair tomorrow. Anything else about goal 2? Okay, moving on to goal 3. These typically go a little bit faster, and then we can look at what we've proposed for the upcoming school year. In goal 3, we're talking about our fiscal responsibility, and certainly the one-to-one implementation and support has been highly successful. We have encouraged and continue to encourage our parents and kiddos to use their devices this summer through our podcasts with All for Public Schools. The Green Team support, they have been in schools at least one day. Every school has had a Green Team coach to help teachers figure out how to best engage students with technology. I met yesterday with the folks from Apple about the iPad implementation in grades kindergarten and first grade, and they also have some good coaching situations. And we have 5 of our district teachers who are engaged with them in their Apple, can't remember exactly what they called it, but it's like an Apple coach where they go through a pretty rigorous process with the portfolio to be able to help support other teachers in using that. We did achieve our goal of an increased BitSight score from 669 to 770, which was our goal. The board has approved the small business and veteran business policies, and Katrina Ponzini, who I introduced to you at the last board meeting, has already begun training with Mr. Marcos Marchena, and she has been already starting to do some outreach into the community. And she will actually have a booth along with Mr. Parker, the Director of Purchasing, at the Chamber's Hobnob event tomorrow to begin community outreach on that program. We continue to promote choice and support the school attractor programs. We did add to our school support models based on feedback from the board and requests from schools about testing coordinators for elementary cafeteria monitors, and some administrative support for our largest schools. And then obviously, we're working hard to try to make sure we're using our ESSER, ARP, and Title I funds to support extended professional learning communities and summer learning programs to support teachers in helping us get better at getting better. We've had some successful AVID training this year. We continue to see its positive impact on student learning. Poinciana High School and Narcoossee Middle remain AVID demonstration sites. And based on feedback from the board, we have developed and initiated a savings plan and an implementation schedule for a new ERP program, dedicating $5 million of your capital funds over the course of the next 5 years each year to be able to achieve that. There's obviously some work we have to do to get ready still, some mapping, maximizing the use of our federal funding to impact student achievement, and figuring out how to sustain those types of things. We have a very significant capital project. Mr. Clinch and his team will share with you at our facilities workshop at 4 all the projects that are ongoing that we talked about in our budget workshop on our capital piece. So continuing to look at high performance buildings, but really maximizing efficiencies within that capital plan so that we can meet the growth over the next 10 years. We are finalizing electronic timekeeping for support staff. In fact, our Kronos integration with Terms is scheduled to go live for our support staff. That's anybody at the district office, our maintenance team, custodian, school nutrition services, not affecting teachers or paraprofessionals at this time, on August the 1st of 2022. And we're moving forward with the multi-factor authentication for increased cybersecurity. That is a significant, or will represent, once we get that completely rolled out throughout the district, a significant potential savings in our cybersecurity insurance. So we think that is also a positive. And then one of the things that we're talking about doing, Mr. Melendez, is also our first year, we really looked at that software review carefully, but we've implemented some things over the course of the last 6 years that we want to go back and look at and make sure that we are eliminating redundancy, checking on the ROI, and making sure that they are research-based and driving results.
I'm actually impressed. What's BidSite? I'm not familiar with that. I got so many names and software
I
programs.
think everybody
So
from
the
Mr.
BidSky score went from 690 to go, what is BidSite? What
I
is it
think everybody
measuring?
from Mr. Thorne's team is at the famous conference.
Okay.
So I'll have to get back to you on that, and I apologize for my ignorance in that area.
One thing I'm impressed with this, but I want to kind of like take things to the next level, because I do appreciate that the way you say accomplishments, what we did, then opportunities, we're establishing the new goals. But now I want to start seeing a little bit more matrix tied to that. Just like you said, the score went from one-on-one implementation and support, and then what does that mean? Is that like the accomplishments, that everybody have a
I'll share that
laptop
with
and
you
things
guys
like that?
next, to the next piece, the metric piece.
Because a part of that is, I know Mr. Thorne was talking to me earlier about, we hired like a warranty company, but then I don't know how many kids are breaking their devices and things like that, and how much it would cost us. So maybe if that can kind of be added on there, and only because I know about that, you know what I mean? So it's like.
And he did promise us
'cause
a
that's
report
that's
on
a change in
damaged
direction,
equipment.
you know?
Yep, so absolutely.
And then, and the same thing too, like installation of audio equipment, perfect. Increase, perfect. But then conducted phishing education campaign, well, what were the results? Was it 20% failures? And when I mean not failures, that's a bad word. The 20% of the people click on the clickbait, you know what I mean? And so we need to retrain, because that's another measurable thing that we can do too, is while we're conducting the phishing campaigns, I want to see a lower number, but hopefully, 0, people click on it, but, you know what I mean? Just something to, when we start doing strategic plans, I want to start measuring with actual empirical data.
Absolutely. Anything else?
No, that's fine. And I see the ERP, like, that was a perfect thing. Establish ERP replacement plan and complete it. So the first thing we did was say that, okay, we wanted to start a savings plan and implement the schedule. And then now the next step is to actually do that. So when you do have the schedule on the ERP system, if that can be like something that he shares with us later, and that way we can see what that is and improve it before it goes full bore.
Sure. Okay, moving on then to goal 4, unless anybody else had questions. Goal 4 is our community engagement and governance strategy. Just a few things to highlight here. We are continuing to use our school choice programs to identify new FTE. 927 was the last measure that we had, but that number continues to kind of increase. And you can see in our school enrollment this past year, we had a district school increase of about 4,100 students engaged in choice, almost over 9,000. Charter school enrollment increased by 866 students. We did have 1,469 more people take advantage of the Family Empowerment Scholarships to attend a private school. The vast majority of those students continue to be students that were not enrolled in our schools and are like new enrollees, kindergarten students. And we were able to reduce our homeschool population by 123 students, which isn't significant, but it still, I think, is a move in the right direction to try to get folks back in. Because last year we saw a significant increase, we think primarily because of the pandemic and people's, apprehensions about coming into school. Our Power Up for Success program, the all-day parent university session did not have great sign-up or registration, so we're moving now towards an on-demand series of informational video casts to try to get that launched. We have launched the podcast this summer to try to increase parent participation in their child's learning and to try to sustain or kind of narrow that summer loss that can happen if kids aren't engaged in some types of meaningful thinking activities and reading in the home over the summertime or participating in one of our summer programs. Our Student Alliance work at Liberty High School and Osceola County School for the Arts is ongoing to try to give students a voice in school improvement. It's been a little bit of a slow go, but I know that Dr. Harris from Liberty is super excited about working with the student ambassadors at Liberty High School and this group to really kind of build and amplify that as a part of her school improvement issues. The Student Voice Project is supported by the University of South Florida. And again, it involves students at Harmony High, St. Cloud High, Tohopokalaiga, Gateway, Osceola, and Poinciana in coming together 3 times a year to talk about a school problem and what they believe would be a good way to try to help address that. The last session that I attended, they were looking specifically at discipline because the students themselves recognized that there was more disruption, more fights on campus, and what could they even do as student leaders to help to kind of stem the tide of that. As a result of some of the work that they've led, we've established the counselor corners in the lunchroom so that students have ready access to student guidance counselors during their lunch period. Teacher Tuesday at one of the schools where students would write positive notes to their teachers. And then they also use dress-down fundraisers to purchase uniform options for students who are out of dress code, as opposed to trying to just stem the tide of punishment. The Student Voice Project has been presented at the Association for Positive Behavior Support's International Conference in April, and they're going to expand that program to include Celebration High and then 2 of our middle schools, Horizon and Denjon, in the coming school year. And then on the next page is some data on our outreach of communications in terms of the Twitter, the Facebook. Something that we've used a lot more of this year has been Instagram because it appears to reach more students. In particular, Anthony Cook, the Friendly College CCC, is very active on Instagram and has really used that to help tie our kids into Zello and engage them in conversations about post-secondary, post-secondary plans. Our website, Let's Talk, and then remind our continued tools that we're using for communication. In terms of opportunities, we've definitely identified that we think it's time to go back and reinforce the customer service expectations that the board established several years ago, in particular responding to parent and community emails and calls within 24 hours, even if you don't know the answer, to at least acknowledge the question and get them an answer. It's something that I think it's there. And then the community relations team is also working hand in hand with our Goal 5 team and student services to develop a district-wide anti-bullying and attendance awareness campaign. And Sheriff Lopez also is working to launch some anti-bullying efforts that he will partner with us on in the schools in the coming year.
I guess with the board's permission, I would like to add something to Goal 4 that we start tracking, because it's specifically community engagement, because we established a couple of committees this year, and that's community engagement as well. Like, we had the safety and security one that Mr. Phelps did, and we had some input. I know we had, like, the curriculum advisory committee was created, and so, and I know that we have the advisory board and, like, the business advisory board, the audit advisory board, and those. So just kind of keeping that there, and so, like, we could kind of measure it and say, okay, this was the attendance there, or maybe even at the end of the year, kind of survey them and say, what are your output, or what is your feedback on that?
Okay.
Because, like, one of them, like, for instance, I spoke to somebody from the business advisory board because we're kind of going over the sales tax, and he was like, well, I mentioned the sales tax a couple times, and staff was, like, not excited about it. They're like, oh, the county's handling it, and so he didn't feel like that's not really good community engagement on his part, because here he is trying to contribute to that part and wasn't getting the full experience of what they wanted out of it, you know what I mean? So I just think that community engagement, getting these committees with the community that are being appointed to them and getting their input and their feedback is just as valuable, and I think that's something that we can monitor.
So you'd like for us to measure both attendance and then their, maybe a survey or feedback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that way we can say, hey, we've had 3 of them, and they were perfectly attended. Well, that means something, that people care. If we had 2 meetings and nobody in the community showed up, then that probably says something about that committee too, that maybe it's not exciting enough material, or they're not being valued. One of the two. I'm not trying to say the reason.
No, I
I'm
understand.
not trying to come to conclusions, but the point is, if we're not measuring that, how do we know if the community is being engaged properly? And I like committees where people are engaged. Like when I had my SRO task force, everyone was fully engaged. They're asking questions. They're getting involved. I mean, some more than others, because just people have different personalities. But everyone was contributing. And the school safety one that Mr. Phelps doing was phenomenal. We went over like the school bullying policies, and they had questions. And so I just think that, but I was there, so I saw it. But the rest of the board wasn't. So when we do our strategic plan and we say, hey, are you doing a good job, superintendent? Well, yeah, we created this committee, and we have this level of participation, and then maybe a 1-year survey at the end of the year. Hey, what was your experience like on the committee? Tell me the good, the bad, and indifferent, and then we can have those survey results with us, and we can say, okay, do we need to adjust the role of that committee, or do we need to provide better content, or do we, I don't know, I don't want to jump to conclusions, that's the point. I just want to measure it, and then I can jump to conclusions later once I see it. And I'm just going to kind of give you the strategic vision of how that can get incorporated into Goal 4.
Absolutely. Any other feedback on Goal 4? That brings us into Goal 5, our safety and security goal. which right now has primarily been about attendance. We did see an improvement in attendance from 89 to 92%. However, we want it to be higher than that because we've seen clear correlation as we've looked at student results about attendance and discipline and school grades and school performance. So our average daily attendance for May was great, 95%, which is good at the end of the school year, because sometimes by then kids are kind of dropping off. But we want to be more consistent with that throughout the year. We have served over 1,600 students through our mental health counseling services that are provided and other resources.
Dr. Pace, do we have any idea how the percentage of that 1,600 is compared to other counties or the state? I mean, are we kind of this, is that kind of a good number? Is it way low? Is it, we have way more than it? do we just
Diane,
have to-
could you kind of give us, do you have an idea?
I couldn't hear you.
In terms of the students seeking mental health services, and forgive me for
That's,
speaking.
no, go ahead.
Are we about average with neighboring districts? Are we on the high end, low end? Do you have a feel for that?
The percentage of the 1,600 to our whole population, is that number?
I don't know that we've compared yet with other districts, but I can certainly look into that. And
Be interesting to see if, I mean, hopefully we would be somewhat in line. If not, or I'd hate to find out we're way low if it's than other places.
The state has created through their mental health allocation and the mental health plan, which is on the board agenda for tonight for presentation and review, is a mental health coordinator position in the district. It's very much like Lester is our safety and security coordinator position, and Diane Jones has taken on that role as my designee. So she attended her first webinar this week, so I think that will be ongoing discussion, but a great question, certainly.
Yeah, and that's a great rolling question too, because it's comparative, because he just said under. I was thinking when, what if it said over? And under can mean an issue too. It means that we're underreporting. Like if everyone else in the state is averaging, especially after the pandemic, there's got to be a lot of referrals. So if everyone else is averaging 10%, we're only averaging 6 or 2%. I'm like, either that or our kids are perfect angels with no issues at all, or like we're like, wait a second, you know, that, because we had that conversation with Mr. Phelps yesterday in full transparency. I had a little bit of a discussion to go over that. And so identifying people that have issues can be an issue too. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't want to just talk to somebody and like give them that stigma that they have a mental health issue, but there's got to be a way that we can give these referrals of services. So that's a great point that Mr. Thacker said, because 1,600 means what? 1,600 compared to what kind of average, and how are we performing? You know, and that way we can get a gauge, is this a realistic number that we're looking at?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that number's down a little bit from what it was in 2021.
I believe that it is. But remember, that's including those that we're referring for mental health services outside of what we offer within the school district. And it's not, that number does not include those that are receiving therapy that we did not refer for.
Okay.
That a parent may already have engaged in outside of the school district.
One of the areas that is going to be a challenge for us moving forward with changes in legislation is the youth mental health first aid training. This is a 6-hour required training, and 80% of the staff has to be trained on an ongoing basis. Right now, we're currently at less than 20%. We thought we had done well, but with turnover, that is still a significant investment of time. And while we have skilled trainers for youth mental health first aid, they can only train up to 20 people at a time if there's one of them. If you're training 40 people at a time, you have to have 2 designated trainers. So that's going to be a priority moving forward, is to make sure that we're compliant with state law. But also, that's really valuable training. My leadership team and I completed the youth mental health first aid training, because it doesn't turn you into a counselor by any stretch of the imagination, but it does help you identify what are those signs that I should be looking for, and if I identify a potential problem, where is the trained mental health person who can look into that?
So it's kind of help them identify.
And then know to seek resources. So some of the things that we've talked about doing as opportunities, obviously want to continue to focus on improving attendance and decreasing chronic absenteeism. The Everyday Lab dashboard continues to provide us really good data and outreach to help parents understand the importance of attendance. We are going to have to build the capacity of our school crisis teams with a new crisis response model. The required mental health lessons in grades 6 through 12, because there are specific modules that have to be done each week. And talking with students, they don't necessarily understand that conversation that they had with their teacher on Wednesday, during Wellness Wednesday, is one of these lessons. And so we've got to do a better job of making sure that's consistent and that there's some actual documentation of that. We've already talked with the board about the substance abuse program. And we're really super excited about trying to address the root cause issues of first-time offenders and their families. And then we want to go beyond just that substance abuse program for our primarily high school students and really looking back at educating our even young people, our children, our elementary school kiddos, through the Too Good for Drugs program, Red Ribbon Week, and other resources to really help make sure that parents and students understand the risks and dangers of substance abuse. Because certainly when you look at vaping as such, it's very, very common. We continue to see good results from AVID, Positive Behavior Support, Character Strong, and Stanford Harmony, to really kind of get to that root cause issues of discipline, and then really look on how we can be really super consistent in expectations.
Yes, my data part now, okay? So, and I looked at some of it, and it could be something that doesn't get put into here directly, but attached to it is like average daily attendance that's there, but like the attendance per school. And that way we can figure out, because sometimes that average is great, but one school is doing really poor, bringing the number down, And so I like to be able to see that, on a regular basis, maybe like once a quarter or something like that.
Okay.
Also, like the number of like incidents per school, the number of assessor incidents, that are there. The number of mental health referrals per school too, and just kind of like drilling down and getting the feel of like where it's generating from, because sometimes it gets rolled up too much, and it's hard to like address something if it's rolled up too much. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And then the other thing too is I guess I have to be careful how we talk about it, because it may be offline. The security issues. We'll talk about that later, like how many cameras are we deficient, you know what I mean? Because I know every school doesn't have the full complement of cameras. So I would like to put that as a goal and say, okay, at some point, I want to have a full complement of cameras at each school. And for security purposes and confidentiality, I don't want you to answer that right now. But just wanted to know that that is a conversation this board is going to have, maybe during an executive session. And then the other thing that's going to have to come up in executive session with facilities are, and I spoke to him about it, and just so we can knock it out now and have to ask later, so facilities can go faster, is there's an issue with communication. The tilt wall construction is great for environmental issues, but you cannot get a phone call out. And we got that security app that depends on cell phone signal to alert everyone in case of emergency. So either the phones go to Wi-Fi mode or something like that, and we can use Wi-Fi, or we have to look at maybe we build schools maybe a little bit differently and to allow communication to go in and out. So I don't know about that. I mean, and like I said, maybe you don't answer that now or answer it later because of confidentiality. But just, the tilt wall construction is not allowing these cell phone signals to go in and out.
Every time now that we construct a new school or do an improvement on a new school, for example, when we added the Business Academy at Poinciana High School, we're required to make sure that the entire school meets standards for DAS radio communications. So in addition to our school camera projects, our secure lobby projects, the DAS radio projects are ongoing to address those issues. You're absolutely right.
And Mr. Stair can say something, but see, DAS is a separate network you have to call. That new app that's like, that's on your phone. Yeah, Rave, I forgot the name of it. And so if we go Wi-Fi extenders or something like that instead of whatever, and we can go Wi-Fi calling, I guess Mr. Shatera has his hand in the back.
The Rave app that you're referring to?
Yes.
Does not work like your cell phone signal. It does work through the tilt wall and the roofs.
What signal does it use?
I couldn't answer that. That's less to that question, but I
Yeah.
asked the same question. I was concerned just like you. But make sure that it works. And we
Okay.
tested it, so.
Because I know, like, when I go to my son's school,
Yeah,
I go
your
to
cell
library,
phone's useless.
it's dead. You know what I mean? So that Rave app ain't gonna do nothing if I got no
According
signal.
to, we've tested it, it does work.
So I guess if we can do, like, we don't have an internal auditor. I wish we did. But if we can do that, because safety is really important, we can't play around with that. So if Ren Shatera can do like random testing, to show those results and say, okay, I want to signal in like the four corners of the building.
And you did approve 2 safety technicians for Lester? And they will be doing those types of things because the state requires it.
Yeah, and I'm only one board member, obviously. The rest of them got to direct that, but I would like to be able to direct staff to do some kind of random audit, kind of like penetration testing, but for the signals to make sure the Rave app is working in like the different areas of the school, of the campus.
In addition to the update to the mental health plan that required a mental health coordinator, they did update the Morgan-Douglas legislation to include some increased monitoring that Lester and his team will be responsible for doing. And if this board at any time would like to have a full executive session on that information, we'd be happy to provide it. It is not something that we typically talk about publicly, but we certainly, just like our cybersecurity audit, if the board ever wants to seek more details into that's what we would do, is just have a closed session. And it could be that we could have a closed session on both if the board wanted.
Dr. Britton, I don't know if it applies here or not, but it'd be kind of nice if we can get the mentor program up and going to monitor the number of referrals per school where that mentor program is in place, just to see if it is working. I mean,
That's a great segue into the Blue Book.
okay.
Well, I love that we could, for the community engagement also, the number of volunteers actively engaged at each school too. So that'd be kind of
Oasis
neat.
volunteers?
Yeah, number of Oasis and volunteers at each school, just another statistic.
Okay. One of the things that as a team we have to talk about is, what is it that we're really trying to achieve here? Okay, what's our big picture goal? And so this is just strictly in draft form. But we're talking about what is a successful graduate, based on the research, based on what businesses are telling us that they want. What are the things that we believe kids need to be able to know and do in order to be successful in life, whether they're going to college, entering the workforce, going into the military, or exploring a particular career? So we talked about oral and written communication, being able to communicate their ideas. As I've talked to business people in my focus groups, that's one of the things that they're really looking for in their employees. And so often our young people, particularly in the pandemic, got so used to texting as their primary means of communication that it's hard for them to have a conversation. So one day, Mr. Melendez, you'll appreciate this, I was at the Criminal Justice Academy board meeting, and all of the leading officers were like, our recruits can't talk to each other, talk to people on the road. You know, they pull somebody over to give them a ticket, and they don't know how to have that peaceful conversation. Or they're called to a domestic violence situation, and they don't know how to have that conversation to de-escalate. So I think that's something that perhaps, and this is something that we would love your feedback on, problem solving and decision making, such a critical skill these days. Collaboration and teamwork, perseverance and resilience. If nothing else, over the course of the last 2 years, we've had to learn you can't give up. You got to stick through the hard times. Critical thinking and inquiry is a critical skill. Those basic skills that Mr. Arguello mentioned previously of reading, writing, and math. But I will tell you that, you know, the best standards take us beyond just basic. It's about not just knowing those basic skills, but applying them. And becoming a responsible digital citizen. People don't understand the ramifications of some of the things that they've posted or taken pictures of or whatever, and how that can be really an issue. And then something we heard from every focus group was the importance of financial literacy. I mean, there is a course obviously going into the high school curriculum, but we want to build that financial literacy from elementary on up through our partners with Junior Achievement perhaps, through our partners with the Business Academy, other community leaders. So again, this is here strictly for you in draft form. I would love your feedback either today or, since we're running, getting on close on time, by our next board meeting, August the 2nd. You can have an individual discussion with me. We can talk about it as a group. And then we will try to draft something for your review by August the 16th. And then we have always brought back any revisions to our strategic plan with the budget on September the 7th. So then if you look forward, where it talked about those opportunities, Mr. Melendez, what we've tried to do is to come up with what are the things that we think would address those particular opportunities under the auspices of academic success, talent management, and certainly this is, like I said, just a draft form, but things that we've talked about in terms of academics. In particular, we've got to get to Tier 1 instruction, those core foundations, because we're doing a pretty good job in many respects of intervening, but our kids are behind at that basic proficiency level, like Mr. Arguello talked about. So what are we going to do to build that Tier 1 instruction across the curriculum, across content areas and all grade levels? We think AVID and Wicker strategies, writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading are ways to help do that. We think consistency and clarity of the cups, making sure that teachers' concerns about assessment are addressed. College entrance exams, SAT and ACT, are now, I believe, going to be incorporated in the next accountability system. So while we've been giving our kids lots of opportunities to take these tests and earn, for example, a concordant score, we're going to have to make sure that they're also demonstrating their proficiency and readiness for either college or career. The acceleration piece that we talked about, use of technology, and then this future-ready skills through Zillow. And then we know that collaboration is the way to go about that through our PLC process. And then, Mr. Melendez, we've drafted some particular metrics. We will take the feedback that you've given us and add to these or change these, and, but this is something that we would report to you on a regular basis.
Exactly. Yeah, because some things are regular, and some things are just once a year.
Right.
Like the ELA score, or now PMI, whatever. They come out 3 times a year, so we want to see those results 3 times. You don't have to see them like every month.
But we are going to be using NWEA, for example, to monitor science, twice a year, and then you have your EOC result at the end. So we can at least have those quarterly reports. In talent management, we're still about recruiting and developing and retaining, really trying to look at a Why Osceola recruitment campaign. We've had some success with that this summer using our Teacher of the Year and School-Related Employee of the Year finalist videos to kind of talk about why they choose to stay here, using both our interest and exit survey data to identify and expand the most effective recruitment incentives, continuing to work on morale then as a really big issue in retaining good employees, providing them with the information that they need, and regular strategies for recognizing, honoring, and celebrating teachers. And then we've got some work to do on these particular metrics, but we'll take your feedback on that. The fiscal responsibility we've talked about as being able to sustain long-term the work that we're doing with the ESSER and ART funds that'll go away in 2024. The digital transformation initiatives, you saw all of those. Again, we've got some metrics on the next page that may or may not be what you want to see, but we'll look back at what you guys have talked about there. We got some great information from you guys about metrics for Goal 4. And then Goal 5, we'll add some of the discipline pieces that you mentioned that are in here right now.
Yeah, I love that. Rather than taking up time, I just thought digest this, and maybe at the next board meeting, kind of give back some feedback.
Or we can schedule an individual meeting between now and then.
But this is excellent. And I just want to say also, the first piece here, I'm actually ecstatic about, because at the last school board conference that we had in Tampa, we kept saying, what is the outcome? What's the outcome? Because we get too lost in, like, how do we make a better school district? But, like, what are we looking at? And a lot of times, we always just say, just reading and writing. Well, I'm like, well, not really. I think I want them to be, like, nice to each other, too. You know what I mean? It's like, is that the responsibility of the district to teach kids how to be nice? Maybe. That can be up for debate. But I like the fact that we can say, okay, it's not just, do you know how to add and subtract? It's, do you know how to communicate? Do you know how to problem solve? You know what I mean? I think that we're looking at a holistic education. The one thing that probably wasn't in there is any kind of athletics or kind of like arts or some kind of other things. These are like extracurricular kind of stuff too. Because when we talk about a holistic child, I'd like to see some kind of, I don't know, I don't have an icon or a cool little slogan. But I mean, there's something beyond that, like the whole, I'm trying to say like the whole student too, because I think that their participation in the arts and in vocational programs can have some kind of
So
value.
maybe an appreciation of what culture.
Yeah, there's no real rush. I'm just giving you the idea, then we can come back at the next board meeting and adapt that. I just think that when we're looking at the holistic, like, how do you know they're a successful graduate? Hey, I think if they know how to play an instrument, it's kind of cool too. Or if they know how to, draw or something like that. It's not just reading and writing all the time.
Any other feedback? No. Well, thank you all for your engagement and support. Appreciate your feedback.
Is the next one at 4 o'clock?
Facilities at 4 o'clock. And thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all for the work.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I forgot to say that.
Hey, Mr. Clinton. You're a little early, but that's good.
and then I guess it's out of the